Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome back. So after all of the tutorials we've done so far on this channel, we're now going to start writing our very first code, our very first script, our very first bit of Lua programming language, and we are going to launch our very first app. And that's happening in this episode right now. Hello, and welcome back. Okay, so my name's Angela McCall. This is a channel that's a bit of a passion and hobby for me. If you haven't checked out my other channels, please go and check my other videos, I should say, so that you can understand a little bit why this channel exists. But today we are going to be launching our very first little piece of Lua programming code inside an app that we are going to create as a brand new project, and it's really exciting. Now, if you have done everything that you've needed to have done before this video and you followed them, this is great because you should be able to crack on with me right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is start by loading my Corona or my Solar2D simulator. Now, if you open the simulator, not just the console, if you open the simulator, it will open the console. If you just do the console, you're going to miss half the information. So make sure that you go to your computer and you basically open up the simulator. Now, I'm just going to share my left-hand side screen with you because at the moment, nothing is happening at all. It's all empty. Okay, so I am going to start by loading my simulator. So I've clicked on simulator. It's actually loaded the console first, and then what we've got is the actual simulator going on over here. Now, we're going to actually start this entire tutorial by knowing what it is that we're going to be programming, which is essentially the Hello World sample. Now, there is one already existing, so I'm just going to dive in here now, down to the bottom left-hand corner, samples. And we're going to click on this Hello World. Now, I did show you this in one of my previous videos, but essentially this is an app that is telling us that everything is working hunky-dory. On the left-hand side here, we've got our Corona or our Solar2D simulator console. The console is basically the brains telling us exactly what's going on behind the scene and the code that is physically running in the engine so that we can see if there's any mistakes or problems. So it starts off by literally just saying that it is loading the actual environment first of all, and then it starts getting down here where it says loading a project. It gives us the file path and any like temporary files and things that we need to worry about goes in the sandbox. Now, you don't need to worry about that right now. That's why it's really small on screen. But essentially, this is with a little bit of text and a little bit of an image going to be your code, and you are going to own this right now. So we're going to start by closing this. I'm going to close the project. And I'm going to click on this little X up here to clear my console. So we've got a blank canvas. Okay, so I'm going to start by clicking on a new project. So this is where we're up to now. So new project. It's going to ask me to give it a name. So I'm going to call it my first Hello World script. Now you can call it Jim Bob if you want to. It doesn't matter. It's just the name of a file, just like anything, whether it's an Excel document or a Word document, whatever you do, you're going to give a file a name, and that's all we're doing right now. Okay, what you do need to do is pay quite close attention as to where this file is going to get saved. By default, you can see here that the simulator has gone to the C drive on my computer, the users folder, myself, the folder for me, documents. Then there's a folder for Corona projects, and that's where at the end you will find this folder. And we are going to look at that in just a moment. Do not worry about any of this. You'll learn all about this in much more future of tutorials. Right now, we just want to get you up and running. Just to give you a real quick idea, we're going to work as if it was on a mobile phone. So my iPhone again, ignore the sizes, that's all default. And we're going to do it in a portrait, which is upright in this particular language or this environment. It could be sideways, which is essentially landscape. Don't know why they've called them that way, but it's an upright phone we are going to do, and we're going to click on OK. Now, what's going to happen now is you can see, oh, lots of things have all happened on the screen. Let me just minimize that one. Now, I've arranged my screen so I can show you all four windows simultaneously. When I'm coding properly, I have 3 monitors and I have this stuff spread out all over my screen so that I don't have to kind of look at things small. Now, you could be on a laptop, which means that you're going to have to learn to flick between these 4 programs. But for the sake of this video, I need to be able to show you. And I know it's real small. You can use the kind of Control+ on your keyboard to sort of zoom in and zoom out on your browser. But essentially, I just want to show you what's going on at the moment. So in the console, these are all the files, all the things that it's loaded to get this up and running to this empty screen. Okay, down here, the Windows Explorer has instantly navigated to the folder it's just created called the first Hello World script. Okay, so there's my folder. It's instantly put in a whole bunch of files and resources that we're going to need. You don't have to worry about that right now. We will cover these in the future, but they are not relevant to today's tutorial. And what we've got going on here is the one that we want to look at is main.lua, which just so happens to have now loaded in my Visual Studio. If your Visual Studio hasn't launched at the same time as this, like mine has, because I've set this as my default programming language or programming software, then you can just go and open Visual Studio and then go to the path that it shows you in your Windows Explorer and double click on main Lua, and then you'll get this up here as well. So that's how you get to this point in time. Now, this main Lua file comes with some basic comments already in here. I'm just going to take these out. So we've got absolutely nothing whatsoever. First thing that you're going to look at and notice. Now, if you see my cursor, on the left-hand side, I've just moved it between the white screen and the black bar. It means I can pull open, as you can see there, all my files and my workspace. Now, this is everything that's kind of going on inside my Corona projects folder down here. And as you can see down here in this bottom scroll corner, I've got lots of games and apps and versions and examples as I've been developing games. Okay, so this folder is where we're at. Okay. Let me just minimize this and this. Right, so here is the, let me just highlight it. There you go. First Hello World script. There's the folder. It just makes that content accessible nice and easy inside Visual Studio, as opposed to also being available down here in Windows Explorer. Now, I am just going to slide this over to get rid of it, so I've got more space to write. And one quick final thing is, if you've got, if you saw in my last video, Visual Studio opened and it was in a black dark screen. If you click on File, go down to Preferences, there's a color theme. You can change it. Now, I think I was on Solarized Dark. I think that was because I used to program at night time when my girls were asleep, and the white glare off the screen used to do my eyes in. But you can just change that real easily. And I'm going to go back to the light default lights, because that is easier for you guys to read on the screen while I am demoing everything. So our first very ever command in Lua, we are going to write the word print, because we want to send a message to our console. And just like you print to a printer, we need to tell the computer we are printing something. I'm going to put a space, and then I am going to open up curly brackets. As I type the first one, the Lua or the Visual Studio guesses that I'm going to need an end curly bracket as well. So it's done that for me. My cursor is flashing between the two. This is probably very small, so I'm going to have to zoom in on this for you. But I'm now going to put in quote marks again. So I type the first quote and it's instantly done the second one for me. Okay, so this is good practice for when you are programming. Always do the ending parenthesis or the ending grammatical comma, punctuation, whatever you want to call it, as you do this, because then you can't accidentally forget it and cause yourself an error and spend hours looking for something like a quotation mark. So I'm literally going to put hello. Oh, she says I can't even spell hello. Hello world. Okay, exclamation mark. Now, if you've never programmed before, this is literally the first command everybody in any programming language teaches you. So I have literally got the word print, space, open bracket, open quote mark, quotation, double quotes, hello world, exclamation marks. That's my little message. Closing the quotes, closing the brackets. Okay. Now this little dot up in the corner here is a little visual clue to say that I have not yet saved the file. Okay. So we've opened it. I've made an edit, or I've written some code, but I haven't saved it. So I'm going to hit Control S because I'm working on a PC. Otherwise, you could also go up to here and go File Save. There's the shortcut commands. But I'm just going to hit Control S. Okay, and then what's happened is over here on the left-hand side is our Corona console. Our Solar2D console has basically printed the words, if you can see down there carefully, hello world. Now, don't worry, we're going to get it on the app in a minute, but that is essentially how you give yourself instructions and check on code when you're writing, especially when you get into thousands of lines of code. If you've got so far through and you want to test something, but you're not sure where in the code the problem is, you can give yourself little messages. You can say like, Angela, line 15, Angela, line 503, or something like that, so that when you're reading through, it will give you little messages as to how far through, and you can kind of help yourself debug problems. So learning how to write code or a message to yourself in the console is the first task that you guys have had to learn. So there you go, you've learned how to do your console feedback. Okay, so what we are now going to do is we're going to look at the syntax for adding that text onto our app, which means you're going to need to learn how, and I said to you in other videos, you are going to literally live in this website. So I'm just throwing up on screen now the coronalabs.com website, and we're on their documentation section. So again, the links will be down below. But this time, instead of clicking on getting started and doing the tutorials, what we're going to do is we're going to access their API reference. Now, API, fancy term, just think of it as like a library or lots of different libraries of tools, functions, things that already exist, that have already been programmed to help you guys. Now, we want to put text on the display. So that's two things we need to do. We need to look for the display library, and then we're going to put text on the display, which means I need to know how to write text on the screen. So I'm going to come down to where it says functions. I'm going to go all the way down the bottom here where it says display.newText. Now, just real quickly, properties, these are things like where on the screen that text will live, what font I use, how big it is, if it's an image, and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like information about an object, whereby functions are commands and instructions. So think of functions as a sergeant major in the army going, do this, do that, do this, do that. And that is essentially what a function is. That's how you are talking to your computer program and telling it to carry out a task. And again, same concept, any programming language, you've generally got properties and functions. So I'm going to click on the display.newText. And what this is going to do now, this is like literally a library book of telling us everything about this particular task and function. Okay, so that is the command itself. I'm going to go through this real quickly, but I suggest you follow this tutorial and read this page, because you are going to need to learn some of this stuff. And of course, once you've used it once or two or three times, it's going to come second nature. Now, what we've got going on here is syntax. Syntax is the funky little word that is given to how things are written in this particular programming language. Now, as you can see here, they have given us an example. Now I'm going to copy that because we're going to use that in just a second. But if you scroll on down, inside, it then gives you basically lots of different kind of like arguments, as it were, or parameters. Those are the two words that generally are described in programming languages as to what you can then do with this command. So you might find that some programming languages will favor the term arguments. Some programming languages might favor the term parameters. But essentially, this bit of text here tells us all the different things that we can do with that command. So that command will tell us the type of text, position, X location, Y location, how high, how small, how tall, the font to use, the font size, all that kind of stuff. So real quickly, going down the bottom here, they've got a legacy version. Now that means this is how it used to be written. And if your code is old, which obviously yours isn't at the moment, but maybe a couple of years from now, your code would be old. This legacy syntax still works, but and you might find when you're watching YouTube tutorials on other people, they might have things written for this command in this way. You just need to be aware it exists, but good programming practice is to start off the way you meant to. So you're going to learn to write it in the way that we are going to do right now. So I've just copied this. Okay, and I am going to basically start writing code. So I am going to just minimize this screen. Okay, we're going to start writing the code now to put a message on the app. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my Visual Studio. I'm going to leave that little command there, and I'm going to give a couple of returns. So I've got some space, and I'm just going to paste for the moment. So there's part of the task going on here. We've pasted this, but there is a problem. Okay, we need to put this text that we're going to create in a little home, and it's called a variable, and it basically is a little bit of a kind of, think of it like a box, and you can put all sorts of different things in that box, and this is where this text is going to live. So I'm going to go to the beginning of my line, okay, and I'm going to type the word local, and I'm going to type the word welcome message. Now let me just finish my text. Okay, so what we've got going on here now is an assignment of commands into a variable. Now, don't worry too much right now about the word local. Basically, when you start writing and designing apps, you're going to have lots of different, say, pages, and the information you're putting in this script is relevant to this particular page, shall we say, and not other pages. If I was to ignore that word local and not use it, that would make this text and this little command available to all my pages, but that can actually cause lots of problems in your coding abilities later on. So let's just learn from me. Don't question necessarily why just yet, because you haven't got enough knowledge to understand the background reasons, but just trust me when I say, when you create a variable, you always create it as a local variable, which means the word local has to go at the beginning. Then if we look carefully, I've got no spaces. And again, programming practice, this variable, lots of people work in different ways. I generally start off by writing in lowercase, and then I'll put any other words with a capital afterwards. Some people might even go, let me come off of that. Some people might even go VAR to say variable and then name it this way, because when your code gets complex, it makes it a lot quicker on the eye later on to realize instantly that that is a variable, okay? Because later on we won't necessarily be writing the text and the code this way. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. I'm just going to keep it really simple for you guys at the moment, and we're just going to call this a little box, a little variable called welcome message, and then basically we've got an equal sign and then our command. Now remember, text script runs from the top of the page down, but when it comes to assigning tasks, commands, instructions to variables so that they have somewhere to live, you always put the command on the right-hand side of the equal sign. The equal sign here isn't equals like in maths, as you would be learning in school. This is basically saying assign this command into this box, okay? So just make sure when you're writing and doing what you're doing, you follow the syntax so it looks like my message or my text on screen right now. So then we've got our display library, followed by a full stop with the command new text, and then we've got brackets with the word options inside. Now this is where we're going to give specific details on writing our text. So I'm going to basically move this down a few lines now. Now the reason I'm doing this is because, as I said, the program runs from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. That doesn't necessarily mean you write it in the top down process. As you can see, I wanted to get the command in and then realized actually what we need to do is now create another variable, local of course, called options. Again, pay really close attention to the format, capital letters, lowercase letters. It all could be different things, even though we would read it as the same word. And what I'm going to do now is, if I just quickly go back and I just show you on this documentation, if you scroll to the bottom of the page, what they have is some examples, okay? And I'm just going to take a bit of a cheat, shall we say, for the moment, and I'm going to copy the options that they've got there, okay? And I'm going to minimize this screen again and come back to my text. So I am going to put in my options. So here we go. Now, when we've got our assignment down here, and it's on the right-hand side of the equal sign, if you notice there is an equal sign. So this first part here and this first part here are written the same way. This is a variable, it's just called options. This is a variable, this one holds different information, this one holds welcome messages. Now, like in the real world, you can get boxes and put boxes inside boxes inside boxes inside boxes. We can put variables inside variables inside variables inside variables. Okay, so because we've got lots of different things that we can tell and give this command, we're going to start this with a curly bracket. Okay, so instead of a normal bracket, we've got a curly bracket, and then we've got the end one. So this is telling us everything in between these two is what's going to live in this variable called options. And again, if you look, there are these assignment operators all the way through. So we've got let me just bring the screen back up. So we've got a text. And again, if you're not sure, going back up here, all right, where have we gone? There we go. It says we can add a piece of text. Now, this one says optional. This one says it's required. So we have to have a string, a piece of text. Again, I'm going to cover this in a bit more detail. So at the moment, we've got our text, which says hello world. Okay, and I'm just so that it can show it to be different. I'm just going to say hello, Angela, just so that you can see it differently between the console and when we run the app. Then we need to give it a location, which is X and Y. Now, I've just copied this off of the what's it called, this example down here. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to come back out of here. Let me just minimize this, because I don't know where 100 or 200 or whatever it is I do, but you don't. I'm actually going to copy this property called content center X, and if you look underneath it, there's content center Y, because that means that this text will be positioned in the very center of our app. Okay, and this is how you always start, because then you can find your objects, and then once you can see them, you can move them up or move them down, move them left, move them right. So I'm just going to minimize this, and I'm going to bring up my Visual Studio again. And so instead of putting it at 100X, I'm going to put it as display it in the center of the screen at the X location. Now I'm going to explain this, the display X and Y coordinates, in the next tutorial. So just for the moment, trust me that you make sure you've got the display content center X assigned to the X, and we're going to do the same again, but just change this to Y. Display content center Y in the Y. The width, I think is the width of the screen. We're just going to use the font that we are given by the app. That's the size 18, just like you would in a Word document, and we can right align it, we can center it, and so forth. So that is all good. Now, if you just look here, because we copied this text, there is a little comment here. This is kind of like us making notes inside our code to help us. This has nothing to do with the app. It will not be shown. It doesn't show up in the console. It doesn't live anywhere or do anything other than exist inside this code, purely so that when we come back and read this code in a few months' time, for example, we can just trigger ourselves a little memory and a little note to ourselves to give us some advice. Okay, and now I'm going to save my Lua programming script, and as you can see, we have now the words hello Angela on here. And if you look over here, the whole of the console reloaded, literally down from there. So it reloaded the console, and again the hello world is still being printed because we've still kept this message at the top of the screen to print to the console. Now you might not be able to see this very well, so I'm just going to change, so you can change things now, but I'm going to make this a 30 pixels. Again, I've just made a change. I'm going to save, and then that will rerun everything again, and there we go. And I think it's right aligned, so if we was to change it and make it left aligned, save. Now you can see that everything's aligned left, and if I put center, it's not going to work because I can't spell center. Right. There we go. Okay, so you can see how you can play. Now, there we go. So that was, sorry, I should have brought that little message up on screen a minute ago. So this is the variable options at the bottom there. Let me just bring myself back up. So what we've done so far is you've learned how to create variables, and you think of them as little boxes, in which point you can put stuff in those boxes. Those boxes could be commands, those boxes could be instructions, they could be properties, they could be colors, they could be fonts, they could be text, they could be name. Pretty much everything that you do in a programming language lives in a variable at some point in its life. Okay. So what we've done is we've created two variables, one with all the different factors and commands to do with how we want to display our text on screen. So its location, its color, its font, its size. Then we have the actual command that tells the display to write the text on screen. Okay, so let's just bring that visual code back up, she says. There we go. So there's our visual code, and well, what we're doing, there we go. And so there is our actual command. So all we've done so far is write hello Angela on our app, but let's get going. So what we need to do now is bring in our image. Now, before we do that, I just want to make sure that you guys are aware. Let me just show you the next thing. So everything that we do, if you saw that when I was going through that process, and like I've just made a change now, that blue dot at the top has just re-arrived. We code, we save, and that relaunches the app. Okay, every single time. If for any reason that we have written our code and we've saved, but the relaunch doesn't happen, we can force it. Now, I'm just going to save the code. As you can see, it's relaunched over here because the screen in the console refreshed. But if you want to, and you're getting, say there's lots of commands here and it's getting a bit busy, you can click on that X and clear your screen. Okay, and then you can click on File, Relaunch here. And that will force the whole it's the same as doing a save, for example. And again, now we can see exactly where we are. Okay, so things that we can do before we bring that image on screen. I forgot to say that a couple of things that we could do. We're going to reposition the text so that our if you just remembered a minute ago, we always start with things going in the center of the screen and then we move it because then we know where they are to find it. So we're going to start off first of all by giving this a different color, and then what we are going to do is we are going to move it up the top here. Now, colors. For the moment, again, this information will live within the API files. I'm not going to go and find this one right now. I just want to be able to show you guys. But essentially what we're going to do is, now that we have our text living inside this variable, we're going to put the welcome, and there you go, Visual Basic guesses of what we're trying to do. So I've just hit the tab and it's finished writing for me. That's a really good little trick or cheat, because it stops you mistyping with lowercase or uppercase or putting a gap in there by mistake. So if Visual Basic is trying to prompt you at trying to guess what you're writing, accept it, because it helps you avoid mistakes. So I am, again, sorry, I didn't want that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I am now going to put in the following command. So what I've got here is a colon, and I'm going to explain this in the next tutorial as well. But for the moment, we've got the command, as it were, set color, and now this 3 111s. Okay. What does 3 111s mean? Well, if you look carefully, they're inside brackets, and there's a comma separating each of them, but there's no comma on the last one. And there's 3 of them, which essentially is the RGB, so red, green, and blue color formatting process. Now, if you've never done anything like this before, that's fine. But when you come to web graphics, designing websites, anything, web uses the color format RGB. Print uses a different one entirely. Okay, so we're in a web environment, we're in a digital environment, we're in a computer environment. So the code that we are using, the color format, is basically RGB. Now, these numbers basically work 0 to 1. Now, if you haven't done decimal places and things yet at school, you should do, really. The age group here is 11 plus that I'm aiming for. But essentially, if I was to put in here 0.5 in the first position, which is the R value, okay, and I save, my text will change to a kind of blue because I've taken only 50% of the red away from the white. You need to understand RGB, and I'll do another video on this in the future. But I could make this one, for example, 0.2, which is the green value, and then on the end here I've got 0.8, and I have no idea what color this is. I'm just literally guessing, but this is how you change colors. Oh, purple, it's my favorite color. Okay, so this is how you can get to change. So there's 0 is basically black, and then you've got 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, all the way up to 1. And then that is basically how the numbers work. And every number kind of combination that you put in here in the R, G, and B locations will tweak the color of your text. I'm going to put 0.2 on the end in the blue. And oh, she didn't mean to move it down a line, and save. There you go. It's kind of gone to like this burgundy, reddy brown color. Okay, so I'm going to go back to making it just good old fashioned white, just so that it shows up nice and clearly for you on this black background. So I'm changing all of these values back to 1 and saving. There we go. So we've got our white text. So that is how we do our RGB text color. Now we're going to position it, because if you remember, I want to put that little map of the world on there. But I said to you at the beginning, you don't know where, because there's infinite directions. You can go forever and ever and ever up, even though our screen is only 3 or 4 inches tall. We could go forever and ever and ever on the right and the left hand side, or down. We can position stuff. Just because we can't see it on the screen doesn't mean to say that object doesn't exist, which is really useful in some games that you pro, like Space Invaders, or things when like little asteroids and stuff come onto the screen. So at the moment, we don't want to put it somewhere that we can't see, because we can't work with it, because we're humans. We need to be able to see what we're doing. So we always position things center, and then once we can see it, we can move it up. So if you remember from maths at school, this is your X, which is your horizontal line, and then you've got your vertical line, which is Y. So whatever number now we do in X and Y will position both a positive number and a negative number from the object's perspective. All right, we are going to be able to move things sort of right or left, or sorry, that's back to front for you guys. So we're going to move it right or left, or we can move it up or down. Okay, when the display is concerned, display will always start. I'm just trying to think if I could do this top. There we go. It will always start with 0, 0 in, and then it will work down. Well, it will work across. Sorry, this way. Everything's back on my camera, and then it will work down. So basically, everything, just like on maths at school, on like a, I don't know, a treasure hunt chart, you would have started with your X and Y coordinates, and you'll be counting X locations on that horizontal line, and then you've got your Y. The X and Y coordinates still exist here. From the display's perspective, everything starts counting in the top corner. This is really confusing because I'm back to front to you guys. So now we know where our screen coordinates work. Okay, if we come back to our code, all right, so we've got our code on the screen over here. Okay, if you remember, we positioned this text on the screen and we told it its X location was center X, and we told it its Y location was center Y. Now we don't want it to be centered Y. What we need it to do is live somewhere right at the top of the screen here. So if this is 0, this right at the top, we're going to say maybe 10 or 20 down. So I'm going to delete that whole line, leave the comma, because that's how I finish the command. And I'm going to put 20, for example, and I'm going to hit save. And there we go. Our text is now moved to the top-ish of the screen. Okay. Right. Now, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add an image. Okay, so first of all, we need an image. Now, I'm going to show you how to do this as code, and then it will be an error because we haven't saved the image in the correct location just yet. So I'm going to put the text on. It's going to cause an error. I will show you how the errors get reported, and then we will go and fix it. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to need to then create another little variable. So that's our message, and we're going to type the word local, and this time I'm going to put world map. Okay, so in a little box, in a little variable called world map, we're going to put a sign, hence the equals, all of the instructions that we need to create an image. Now, again, if you remember, I did show you the display library and all the commands. You know where to find it, but I'm just, to save time now, I'm just going to copy and paste from my notes on this tutorial. And so we've got the display library using the new image rectangle command with the name of the image inside quotation marks. Then we put a comma, and then X and Y. Actually, no, that's the size. I do apologize. We've got the width, and then we've got the height of that image. Okay, now if I save this, oh, hang on, one second. I need to just copy. Right, so what we now need to do is, just like we did up here, we need to give it this variable. We need to tell its X location, where to position, and we need to tell its world map, there we go, it's guessing it, dot Y position, where to live. And I'm going to explain these syntaxes to you at a later time, but we're just going to copy our X because we're going to put it in the center, and we're going to do the same, but we're going to change that last letter to Y. Okay, now I'm going to run this and it's going to cause an error. This is how errors get displayed. So in fact, let me just do this again. Hang on, I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to tell it to reload. There's the error again. So now you can see in the console, this is just the information regarding this current instance of the app. It's saying warning, and it's giving me the location. So C drive, users, Angela McCall, documents, line 18. So in the file called main LUA, which is our file, On line 18, which is down here, failed to find the image world.png. And that's because I haven't got the image in the correct folder yet, because I wanted you to understand the power of putting things and your file hierarchy and getting organized, because I wanted the error to show on screen so that you get used to what's going on. Okay. Basically, if you look at this little pop-up here, it's basically then telling us there's it's reiterating this next line down, which was the last thing. It's basically also saying it can't do the command on line 19 because we think there's a problem on line 18. So it's just basically, as far as the programming language is concerned, it's executed everything as much as it possibly can before it's got stuck. And that's kind of just giving us the very last problem that's been reported, even though there was a couple. We're not going to relaunch it just yet because we've got to go fix this. Now, I happen to have saved onto my desktop. I'm just going to bring this up here. I've saved onto my desktop the map, and I'm going to make this link available to you so you can download it as well. So I'm just going to copy this image just so that I can do this tutorial for you. So when you're in Photoshop or Canva or whatever graphic design program you want, and you're creating your little images for things, okay, save as a PNG, which means all the white border around the circle doesn't show, and it's a transparent image. And then we are basically going to save it. Now, this is why I said to you, you need to know where you save things. I've got my Corona project saved as a quick access up here because I'm always going in it. But essentially, you go down to your PC, you go to your local drive, you go to users, Angela, then you've got your documents, where's it gone? Then you've got your Corona projects, then we've got our first Hello World script, and now we are in the hierarchy of our folder, and I'm going to right click and paste. So there's our image, and if I minimize this back down to the bottom, you can see our image is listed down here. Now, okay, if you look, the wording is exactly the same. So it's called world.png. So there's no capital letters difference. It's syntax perfect. Okay, I'm now going to rerun this. And there's our image, because it now knows that everything is living inside this folder we created, which was called First Hello World Script. So we have just quickly touched on errors. I've just forgot to flag up my little prompts here, but we've then looked at files and folders, and we understand PNG images. And that basically means that this kind of tutorial's kind of come to a close. It was quite a long one because there's a lot to learn, not just the text. But what I'm going to do now is I am going to go over some of these things that we have just learned that I've kind of skipped through quite quickly, like this command here on this object. And again, I didn't really tell you why there was a .x or a .y after this variable. So I'm going to touch some of this stuff now in the next tutorial so that you can kind of understand a bit more about what's gone on today, so that as you can understand the programming language, we can start to layer up your knowledge now and start to do a little bit more funky things with our apps. So if you found that useful, let me put myself back on screen so I can say goodbye to you guys nicely. Please do subscribe to my channel, stay notified, and I'll be with you on another tutorial real soon. Thank you very much indeed.